You're watching Common Fitness Myths Debunked by Dr. Alyssa Gall on Resonance Wellness TV, part of our Whole Life Medicine Alleviate series. Keep in the loop about future webinars and events on whole-life-medicine.com. Hello and welcome to Common Fitness Myths Debunked by me, Dr. Alyssa Gall, and thank you for your patience. As usual, this presentation is given in the context of the whole life medicine model. And when we talk about fitness, we're really talking about starting points, mostly in alleviate. So obviously exercise is one of those things that we could think of as a root cause issue. It also has a role to play in moving the circulation around and creating detoxification. And I guess we could argue for it as the missing ingredient. We could also say that there's some aspects of a line that exercise really applies to, because it certainly takes a mindset to exercise, as we all know. It takes a certain amount of motivation, and sometimes that's the hardest part for people. So hopefully I'll be able to answer some questions. I was really quite amazed at how lousy the research is about fitness. I mean, there is some fitness research, but it's not as good quality as I would have thought, and a lot of it is not as clear as you might think. And the research that is there sometimes is surprisingly opposite to how people have been taught how to exercise or how to work out. So hopefully we'll be able to give you some sense of that today. So I wanted to start out by just talking a little bit about physical readiness, because obviously when you start a physical activity program, sometimes, you're starting from scratch, or you're starting from scratch again after a long time since the last time you did a workout program. And so there is actually a way of just screening to make sure that everything is good to go with that. It's called the Physical Activity Readiness Questionnaire. And all this is really a self-screening tool. What it's designed to do is just make sure there's no safety risks for exercise based on your health conditions. So all of those questions are really designed to do is rule out like worst case scenario. And the questions are really these. Has any doctor told you had a heart condition that you should only do physical activity recommended by a doctor? That's question one. Question two is, do you have a bone or joint problem that could be made worse by a change in your physical activity? The third is your doctor currently prescribing drugs, for example, water pills for blood pressure or heart condition? Do you know of any other reason why you shouldn't do physical activity? And also, do you lose your balance because of dizziness, or do you ever lose consciousness? Or have you ever had chest pain while you're doing activities? So, I mean, these are kind of obvious cardiovascular risk questions. And if you answered yes to any of those things, it's actually a good idea to take the series of follow-up questions. And I can always send you a link to this, but it's the PAR-Q Plus, and that's a series of 10 follow-up questions that just lets you know whether or not you should consult with somebody before you do exercise. There is also, I would say, a really good idea would be to have a bit of a pre-assessment, like a pre-screen in terms of body composition and in terms of fitness, where you're starting at. And there's a couple of reasons for doing this. The biggest reason for doing a pre-screen is because you want to know what your starting point is. Because as you're going to find out as we go through this presentation, aspects of fitness sometimes are not readily apparent, sometimes almost until 6 months into an exercise program, sometimes as long as a year. And so you want to know like your body mass index. That's not like the super most awesome measure of fitness, but these are just metrics that we can use to see if you can compare and contrast over time, not day to day, but potentially week to week or month to month. You can also do something called bioimpedance analysis. That's BIA. So that is one of those machines where you stand on it barefooted and it tells you how much fat, protein is in you, bone, water. And it's a guesstimate because different machines are going to be different. But if you keep measuring on the same machine, that can also be really useful. And then doing a fitness evaluation so that you know how fit you started is also really useful. So, and there's lots of measurements that you can use to evaluate fitness, and it really depends on what your goal is, what those measurements should be for you. So, as an example, here we have flexibility, we have upper body strength, we have core strength, endurance, target heart rate, and balance. So, a flexibility test could be something as simple as like the sit and reach test. So that's the test where you basically are sitting upright on the floor and reaching over your toes. And there's actually a measurement, how many centimeters is how much flexibility and what average is, or what if you're tight in that joint. But you can't just do flexibility from one joint. As an example, if I was going to do this as a flexibility test, my hamstrings are my tightest area. So this is not a good test for my overall flexibility. You can also use like shoulder zipper, where you're basically putting your two arms behind your back like this and seeing how easily you can touch or hold. You can also do groin flexibility. So that's where you put your feet together flat and then pull your feet in as close as you can to your groin. And again, a certain number of centimeters from your groin is telling you how flexible you are. If we measured it by that, that's my best flexibility. Like, it's very, very close. So it really depends on your body type and what you've done over time and what's tight and what's not. So it's nice to kind of get an overall view of that. So upper body strength is pretty simple to measure. Usually you can just measure it doing push-ups, or, like not being able to do a push-up mostly. And then you can also do a core strength test. So a plank test would be a good measure of core strength. And, the classic one that in theory you would use at the gym is where you actually are in a plank for like half a minute or to a minute. And then you try putting one arm up and then the other arm up, and then trying putting opposing arms and legs up. So, these are all works in progress, and they're also good measures of, are you building core strength, as an example. You can do endurance testing. So an endurance test would, the classic endurance test for fitness is a 12-minute run. So you're basically running as far as you can in 12 minutes. So you can do it by distance, and you can also do it by using a VO2 max calculator, but that is a lot more rocket science, than anybody doing a home exercise program or even a gym exercise program might want to do. Sorry, I'm just having people pop in, but the windows are all overlapped here. So then when you do an endurance test, you're basically, like I said, measuring how far you run in 12 minutes. And there's like a range of what's average for your age, what's low for your age, and what's pretty good for your age. And again, you can use it as a measure of, as you get more fit with cardio, are you improving your 12-minute run? You can also figure out your target heart rate and see what your target heart rate is when you are doing what you think is reasonable exertion. And so target heart rate is usually expressed as a percentage. So it's about 50 to 85% of your maximum safe heart rate. And so that's based on your age, subtracted from 220. So if you're 50, it's 220 minus 50, or 170 beats a minute. So at a 50% exertion level, it's 50% of that. So that's 85 beats per minute. That's what you're kind of aiming for if you were do your exercise at 50%. If you're doing your exercise at 85%, you'd be aiming for a target of 145. So it's just ways that you can determine what's the safe heart rate. And you'll, of course, have to have a little bit of a heart rate monitor or count. And this is why everybody sees everybody counting at the gym, to make sure that you're not overdoing it, but that you're not also underdoing it, which I think most people tend to be a little bit on the underdo side, right? And last but not least, we're also going to look at balance. Sometimes, especially as you're getting older, balance is probably one of the more important metrics. And especially if you're not always the best in strength. If there's anybody who's not on mute, do you guys mind going on mute, just in case this is just being recorded? I might just mute anybody that I see on here that's not muted. Okay, awesome. So this just gives you a little bit of a heads up that you want to do some measurements ahead of time, because you also want to make sure that you are making progress. And one of the things I did find as I was researching this is a lot of the time people actually don't make very much progress, and there's some very specific reasons why. All right. So what we want to do is obviously get ready and set and go, but I really encourage you to think strongly about how to pick things that you like to do for exercise and somehow combine them with the things that you have to do for exercise. And like I said, I encourage you to start where you are. It really does take a fairly long time to recognize physically the effects of an exercise program when you're starting from scratch. And strength and muscle size actually change literally within hours of your first workout. But first of all, you probably don't have the equipment to measure that subtly. It's there, it's happening, but it's not going to you're not going to gain like a half a pound of muscle weight overnight. So you're going to take at least 6 months to see a major change in muscle shape and sculpting in your body. And it might even take longer in terms of weight loss. But within 48 hours of starting an exercise program, pretty much you're going to have better blood sugar control. You're going to have better cardiovascular function. You really, if you can keep track of your fitness improvements based on the things that you measured in the beginning, that will help show you the progress, even if you don't feel it in the way you expect it to, or see it in the way that you really hope you would see it the morning after you do one major workout, right? So in Canada, only about a third of people are actually doing 30 minutes of moderate exercise, like 4 times a week. That's really horrible. It's actually worse than the Americans. Lots of the time, the Americans and the Canadians are pretty much even in most things. And here, I think part of it obviously could potentially be winter. But in Canada, we're actually worse than Americans in moving. But if you just go from like no exercise to slightly active, there was a study of 250,000 people between ages 50 and 71, and they found that by just moving a little, they were 30% less likely to die. That's a really big population. So chances are, like, the statistic is a valid one. It has a good, it has a good p-value on it. And if you put it moderate exercise, they were 38% less likely to die. And if you put vigorous exercise, it was 50%. That is a really big change. And that's not like a whole big exercise program. That's just getting somebody to actually do some of it in that population. That's how big of an impact exercise can actually have on you in a short window of time. So those are the short-term gains. The long-term gains are going to be, a fitter body, a stronger body, one that you feel more comfortable in, one that has better balance and flexibility and all of those things. But even before you remotely get to that, you'll be way less likely to die. So then you can live long enough to actually enjoy those things, right? So, we're going to take a look here at the first myth that's most people say a lot of this, and that is no pain, no gain. I mean, how much of the time have we heard that? I mean, not just with respect to exercise, but with respect to many things. And we all want to believe that, the more agonizing something is, the closer you're going to get to your fitness goal. But the type of pain that you're experiencing actually makes a big difference. So that's why we're putting no pain, no gain as myth number one. And so there's a difference between good pain and bad pain. So good pain technically would be like the mild burn following a workout. So it's mild, it's short-lived burning sensation felt in your muscles. That just tells you that you've activated those muscles. It's signaling the activation. But bad pain is where you've overdone it and you're tearing or you're straining things. You're making the body endure too much stress too quickly. And that kind of pain typically affects more joints and ligaments and muscles, so they'll become tender to the touch. A lot of the time, it takes about a day or two for this to show up. So if you're working out and the next day is your arms are like on fire, you actually overdid it. And when you overstrain like that, then you're not going to be making easy gains. You're going to basically be repairing the damage that you did. So the magic is to try and find that slight burn that's temporary, but it's not going to the place where the next day you feel like you got hit by a truck. This is not a good sign and will not help the goal actually at the end. So good pain is good because, obviously if you're starting out in the very beginning of an exercise program, you are more likely to have muscle soreness in the very beginning, and you almost you're going to expect that a little bit. And if you're adding a different activity to work out, just like if you've never skied before and you go out skiing and you feel all the muscles that you use in skiing that you don't use in your ordinary everyday activities, that's an example. Sometimes when you switch it up, those things are normal. If you are increasing the intensity of an exercise from what your typical is to something a little bit more intense because you're working towards something. And that's what you should always be doing, is working a little bit towards something so that you don't just, lift the same 5-pound weight and call it a day, but where you actually are just pushing a little bit the envelope. You'd be amazed at how much gain you can make by just moving that bar a smidge every day, not like 2 pounds, but like a smidge. And then if you, however, are performing an activity over and over without a break, sometimes you'll also get the burn or all the way into the second day pain. So it's like it should be no good pain, no gain, not just no pain, no gain. So again, growth is possible without physical pain after a workout. Just like when you go and use your muscles to walk. If anybody has had the experience with an older parent or maybe yourself after an injury where something has been immobile, what you'll notice is the muscle tone quickly leaves. So as an example, I ruptured my Achilles tendon playing soccer many moons ago. And when I got my cast off finally at 12 weeks, I cried because my leg was so little. It looked like a little stick figure. And of course, it has regained that muscle. But when you don't use that, walking, you actually lose a lot of tone. And so you see that sometimes in the elderly that are wheelchair bound and are not getting a lot of physio or exercise movement, or they're not actually doing movement from their chair. They just lose it and they get weaker and weaker and weaker. And then when you try and stand up, it's not so easy. Just standing up after 12 weeks outside of my cast, I basically fell down. And so that was shocking because at that time I would have probably been, early 30s. So it happens regardless of what your age is. So this is the reason why we just try. And even if you feel like you're not great and very mobile, just using an exercise program from where you are is enough to actually help you maintain and develop. Now, this is another big myth, is that you can quote unquote target a fat burn. That is really a myth. You cannot target burning of fat off of a specific spot on your body. There's just really no shortcut to losing subcutaneous fat. So if fat loss is your goal, you want full body strength training and cardio workouts together. So aerobic exercise obviously burns the most calories. So aerobic exercise is where you're combining, you're still able to use oxygen in the muscle to run the metabolism. And then also you want to build your muscle through strength training. So you're actually expanding the size of your muscle to keep the amount of muscle fibers doing your metabolism high. So that's where most of your metabolism occurs, is in muscle fibers. I mean, relatively speaking, in terms of the body. So actually your organs burn a lot more energy than your muscles do. So your brain, as an example, your heart, a lot of organs actually are way better metabolically than your muscles actually are. But part of that is because they're performing vital functions for you, including your thinking and your consciousness. And it takes a ton more metabolism in those zones. Unfortunately, you're not going to flex your brain. You're basically going to be moving only your muscles during this. Well, maybe you can think a little bit, when you're doing this. So if you are combining both of those things, what you're going to find is that the combination actually gives the best results. And excess fat will basically eventually come off from the places where you want it gone. But it is really impossible to target it in one zone, even if you only move your leg or wherever it is you're trying to burn it off of. It doesn't work. There's no data that supports that I could find. Now, this is also a bit of a myth that cardio is only for people wanting to lose weight. This is myth number 3. So many athletes make the mistake of focusing all their energy on one single form of exercise, or people who are doing an exercise program, they only focus on one kind of exercise. But the truth is, everybody needs cardio work. So cardio is basically just, again, that you are moving enough to get your heart rate up and your circulation going. So the number one benefit of that is that you're strengthening literally your cardiovascular system. So the cardiovascular system is your heart, your blood vessels, a huge network of blood vessels and veins. And when you maintain that efficiency, it's really essential because it's supplying the fuel and the oxygen and the nutrients to every tissue in your body. So a healthy cardiovascular system probably provides more energy to you on a daily basis and makes any activity that you do feel easier, because as you build cardiac capacity, you oxygenate better, you can supply all of these things better to your muscles, and it feels easier to you. So it isn't that you have to wait for your muscles to grow. You're actually, like I said, reducing your risk of death very quickly by just doing at least something. So it does protect you from cardiovascular disease. But there's other things too that improve when you do that. For example, your brain really benefits from that. Because remember how I said your brain is actually one of the hugest metabolizers in your body. It takes up a lot of your food molecules to keep that brain running. And increased blood flow to there actually makes your brain faster and more adaptive. It stimulates the growth of new brain cells. And it's mostly because there's all these compounds that get released that are also repair molecules. And so they stimulate tissues to repair and renew. And it doesn't have to be in the muscle. It can be in an organ, or it can be in a brain. So if you want to repair something that you can't physically go in there and massage, this exercise is a way to do it. So you will get better in terms of the brain. You're going to get better cognition. You're going to get better memory. You're going to get better response times to different tasks or to your senses. And it drastically staves off cognitive decline as you age. Of course, cardio is also helping you burn fat as fuel. But there is data that shows that mental health and well-being and sleep and immune function are all improved when you do some version of cardiac workout. So this is another myth. If you've been told or have heard that fat can be turned into muscle, you have been misled. The truth is that those two tissues are totally different. They do not transform one into the other. So what you're really doing, and maybe hopefully what it's referring to, but some people do take this literally, is that as you improve your muscle capacity and lose fat, it looks as though you have, more muscle and less fat, but it isn't converting from one to the other. In fact, what happens in fat is you actually don't even reduce the number of fat cells. I don't know if you all realize that or not, but you actually only have so many fat cells. And generally speaking, you're not replacing those fat cells at a very high rate. What you're doing is just expanding the amount of fat within each fat cell. So there's a big kind of oil blob or fat blob that's like a specialized organelle within a fat cell. And that's actually what's losing and gaining the fat, is you're actually sticking it in this particular organelle in a fat cell. So when you're losing fat, and so what you're doing when you're losing fat is you're drawing on your stores of stored energy, because fat is just basically stored energy, and you're using it in a way that where the net amount is coming out versus just going in. And of course, you want to be storing fat. You don't want to have zero fat on your body. If you have zero fat on your body, you have other problems like no hormones, as an example. And this is a big trouble in people who are super athletic. If you're overtrained and you start to dip down into the ranges of fat, which are not enough to produce basic hormonal compounds, you're in trouble. And normally, like in a woman, what happens is the period will stop. So if you're menstruating, this is a sign that you maybe are overtraining. But even if you're not menstruating, if you get too low of a body fat percentage, there's problems with that. And both men and women too. Now, men, generally speaking, are much more lean than women are. And that's just normal based on normal reproductive physiology. A woman will never typically be as low body fat percentage as a man. It's just built differently. So, but you can't just convert your fat into muscles. It might be kind of interesting, but I think you'd have trouble long-term anyways. Now, there's also some really interesting theories about sweating. Like somehow you have to sweat. The more you sweat during exercise, the more fat you lose. So that's not really true. So you can kind of see how one could come to that conclusion. So what is true is that the harder that you work out, the more calories you'll burn and mobilize. And, if you put in that much effort, you might actually have increased sweat. But again, that's not true for everyone. How much you sweat really doesn't have anything to do with how much fat you lose. But you are potentially needing to get rid of more heat. So as you're working out and actually moving things around and burning energy, you generate heat. And so you have to get rid of the heat. And so the sweating obviously is a self-control mechanism for that. And that's also another myth. Like if you're not sweating, you're not working hard enough. That's not true. It's some people just are not big sweaters. So let's look at the function of sweat to kind of get a better sense of this. So like I said, your body uses sweat to cool down. So sweating isn't a gauge of how hard you're working, but it's rather a measure of how hot your core temperature is. And so the process of body temperature regulation is pretty individual. It's unique to every person. And then fitness will impact how much activity is needed to raise your core body temperature. So people with a naturally higher core body temperature or more sweat glands obviously produce more sweat. Dehydration also has an impact on how much sweat you produce. And of course, one of the warning signs of heat exhaustion and heat stroke is not sweating. So like I said, it just doesn't indicate how hard you're working or how many calories you'll burn. But it might indicate that you need to acclimatize to heat plus activity. So if you exercise in heat, it takes about 10 to 14 days of exposure to the elevated temperature to adjust. That's a fairly long time. And probably in Calgary, like outside, there's not enough temperature to adapt. Like it's just not 2 weeks of solid, 35 degrees to adapt to that. You can make yourself more comfortable though on those days where it does get warm like that and you're outside by, like allowing sweat evaporation. So wearing layers so you can remove layers to let sweat evaporate. It's not really required to have like super fancy, materials for that. I mean, yeah, some of them have holes and stuff that you can get more like sweat and stuff off, and that can make you more comfortable. Plunging into water is probably the best way of cooling down. And there's some really interesting research that shows like that slushies type stuff, so a water with ice mixed in it, actually has the biggest difference in temperature reduction versus just water alone. So maybe not like slushy, like with the stuff in it, but like slush, like crushed ice, and having that actually reduces your core temperature substantively faster. So the kids hanging out at the 7-Eleven in the summertime, they clearly have the right idea, even if it may be the format is not quite exactly what a mom would like. Now, stretching. There is, I apologize, I cannot spell stretch very well. Stretching. So we have a very strong myth that says that stretching reduces injury. And what I figured out is there's no evidence for that from any experimental data. It's not to say that stretching is not important, part of living in your body. Obviously, when you want to develop range of motion or recuperate range of motion or develop flexibility, stretching is going to be part of that. But what we do know about stretching is you should not be stretching cold, meaning you don't want to do the classic thing that I learned how to do, like when running, which was, or warming up to running, was grab your ankle and like yank your your foot back to stretch your quadricep. Does everybody remember those stretches? I still see people doing those stretches. That actually can damage unprepared muscle fibers. So it's not great when it feels painful to stretch like that. It's recommended actually that if you are going to do an activity that you warm up with something kind of gentle. So a gentle, like mild version of what you're going to do. So if you're going to lift weights as an example, just a couple of like movements in that direction without a weight at first. Or, if you're going to do something like swimming, like moving your arms in the range of motion, not static, totally dynamic in movement. Or like lunges where you're moving and lunging a little bit, like deeper lunges, but not like dramatic, just to get things moving. It's actually been shown up that if you do it like that, and then you do your activity just very, very briefly, and then do the activity, actually it works the best for that activity. But if you want to do stretching as a activity, that the stretching should actually come after the workout, at the end, when everything is warmed up. Then you can actually make some impact on loosening up something that is not very flexible, because everything's warm and compliant and able to do what it is. So that actually surprised me as I was doing research to this, because I think this is a very common thing that we hear people saying, but the research does not support it at all. And of course, being over flexible in certain sports is actually not a great idea. Because if you're like not stable in some sports, or you're too bendy, you can actually really injure yourself. So this is another myth, the myth number 7 here, which is that cardio should be done before strength training. And the misconception is kind of stemming from the belief that lifting weights will tire people out before cardio, I think. But the real solution, again, data-driven, is that really what works best is to mix it up. So unless there's something that you're specifically training for. So if your goal is beach muscles, you can like display them on the beach, then you want to start with weights and end with cardio. And if your goal is to do a 5K run, you're going to do the cardio and end with weights. So the reason for that is that actually you get a better improvement in the beginning activity. And that's been shown in experiments. So if you are after one, then you want to kind of orient it that way. But, if you're not training for anything specifically, mixing it up and kind of creating a metabolic challenge, by doing different things is not a bad idea. Over time, you'll just learn what your preferences are as well. You might have a preference for doing it one way or the other. But like I said, the only data supports that if you're training for a specific thing, to start with that thing. So I thought that was quite interesting. And I hadn't heard it that way before. Now, there's also the myth about muscle toning. So you either strengthen a muscle and make it bigger, or you decrease the fat on the muscle, like in the subcutaneous skin on top of the muscle. There's actually no such thing as toning a muscle with high rep, low weights. And that's been put out for a long, long time. Actually, what that ends up doing is it ends up encouraging women, especially, to use weights that are too low to make pretty much any difference. And that could be very, very frustrating. So you have to use a weight that is about 40 to 50% of your 1 repetition maximum. So as an example, we're just going to take bicep curl as an example. If you pick up a 20-pound weight and you can just barely do that bicep curl at 20 pounds once, and then you have to kind of put it down because you're like, oh my God, I think my arm just about broke off. That is telling you, okay, 20 pounds is your one weight maximum. And then you're going to go to probably somewhere between 8 and 10 pounds as your set weight. So you're going to pretty much lift that set weight until you, like in probably 3 sets of 8 to 12, depending on how it feels to you. And hopefully by the end of that third set, again, reaching failure with that level of weight. You actually want to get to the end and not be able to think about doing one more. That, of course, increases over time with training. So, the first time you do this weight thing, your 1 rep maximum might be just that, but recheck it every couple of weeks because it probably is going to change. It's actually going to get bigger. So unfortunately, like I said, with women, we have this kind of thing of, oh, I'm going to make these huge, muscles out of if I do too much of this weight, but you're totally not going to do that. And you're also not going to do anything if you just take the 5-pound weight and like do 600 repetitions with it. It actually will do nothing. Hold on a second. I have to plug in my computer before it dies. I did that before. Okay, so what else did I want to say about that? Well, there is another myth here where, restricting caloric intake and increasing cardio is going to lead to weight loss. And cardio is a great tool for an aid in weight loss. It's not the only answer for toning muscles. So you can't just do cardio and get muscles out of that. Now, of course, if you're running or something like that, you're going to be building some of your running muscles, but not all of your muscles are going to build based on that. And you're not going to be able to do full body. So again, you have to intelligently put the two things together. So weightlifting, compound things, circuit training where you're doing different activities with weights, all will aid in fat burning and build muscle. So if you are in a sport like where you need to use power, so maybe you're a golfer or you're a tennis person, or you are in baseball, something that takes kind of like an implement that you're going to use. That was my imitation of baseball. How you want to do is you want to actually use a weight at about 60% of your maximum lift capacity, so a little bit more than just your rep weights, in a manner that imitates what you want the power for in an explosive motion. So like I said, if you're in baseball, you're using a weight this way, or if you're in golf swings, you're using the weight this way for 3 sets of 3 to 6 reps. It's a lot less reps because it's in motion and it's a little bit heavier. But when you train like that, you'll actually improve at your sport. So, like if you spend a couple of months before the softball season doing weights in that way, and the first time you make contact with that ball, everybody's going to be like, whoa. Even if you probably did it for the month. I don't know where the baseball season is right now for the softball season. But again, it's mostly women who are kind of fearing bulking up and avoiding weight. So let's just take a moment and just discuss what the other advantages are, some of which you probably already know by doing weight. And that is, first of all, you're going to get better bone maintenance, growth and maintenance. So anytime you're placing stress on a bone, you help get them stronger and denser. And doing weights actually can support the bones more effectively. It decreases your risk, obviously, of osteoporosis because your bones are in constant buildup and breakdown. And if you put a certain amount of strain on them, you'll actually improve your bone density. Now, you want to be careful about this. If you have severe osteoporosis, you don't want to just be taking up like a major maximum weight plan. And like we already looked at the screening questionnaire. So if you've got a screening questionnaire answer that includes osteoporosis, you're going to want to have that program modified for your condition. The second thing is that when you improve your muscle mass all over your body, so you don't want to just do one kind of muscle exercise, you want to do ones that target your weak areas, or kind of like taking into account that you're doing a little bit over everywhere, that actually will by itself increase your balance and coordination, and sometimes will actually improve your flexibility, because if you do it right, you'll have, and you do your stretches afterwards, you're actually going to make a much more beautiful, long, but more bulky muscle. So that helps protect your joints from injury. When you have good muscle building around a joint like a knee or a shoulder or an elbow or an ankle, and you do that intentionally, you will stabilize the joint. And in fact, most people don't realize it, but joints themselves are just the parts where the parts are meeting. It's mostly the musculature that is holding that joint in the proper mechanic. It's not the ligaments. The ligaments just tie the bone to bone. And the tendons are actually the ends of the muscles inserting onto bone, but they insert over a joint. So a knee joint, all the muscles of your upper leg actually go over the joint and insert under the joint onto the second part of your lower leg, and vice versa. So the things that are on your lower leg are inserting up over the joint onto the back or front of the femur bone. So when you create stronger muscles, upper and lower, you're actually creating stability in the joint. And ankles have a lot of range of motion, but if you learn how to do like work with, say, resistance bands, like with those TheraBands, which is kind of like doing a weight program, but obviously your ankle can't lift weights very well, but you can actually build the musculature that will stabilize an ankle joint. So really important. And then of course, if you get more muscles, you will maximize how much fuel you can burn in the muscle on purpose. Obviously, you can't just, maybe if you use your brain a little bit more, you could burn off some calories that way. I remember I had a prof in the beginning of my science degree who pointed out that our brains, because we're at university, we're going to take about 2,000 calories just to like do your schoolwork. So he said, make sure to eat some more, because you're probably going to need all this energy for your brain. I don't know if it worked out that way, honestly. Now, another thing that I've heard is that ab exercises are the only way to a strong core. And this is another kind of not quite accurate statement. So you can actually have a six-pack and still have instability through your core. So you can do crunches, you can do your V-ups and Pilates. It's not going to, those things by themselves are not going to flatten your stomach flab at all. That's not really what you're doing with those kinds of things. Most of that is actually exercising the superficial part of your abdomen. And of course, abdominal exercises do still play a role in strengthening abdominal muscles, but you want the ones under. And the muscles under are actually not as engaged by that. Those muscles are more engaged by leg and hip and back workouts. So a lot of people will have like the perfect six-pack and their hips are so weak that they think they're having trouble with core stability. It isn't core stability. It's actually that they have over-exercised. They have this beautiful six-pack, but their hips aren't strong at all. And so the core is literally everything from your neck down the core of your body, all of the chest muscles, all of the back muscles, all of the inside hip muscles, all the things that are holding things onto the hip. And that's the full core. It isn't just your abdominal wall. And so, yeah, there's lots of people who have like not great abdominal tone, but most people who don't have great abdominal tone also don't have super great back and hip tone. So it's like the whole kit and caboodle. And this is the reason why we want to do programs that especially if you're just doing a generalized program, that you make sure that you do a little bit from the different zones. What else did I want to say about that? I mean, I guess at the end of the day, you don't have to do daily crunches if you don't want to do them. You'll actually get a better result if you do work some of the bigger muscle groups. Now, this is another quote I've heard: abs are made in the kitchen. Like if you eat right, you're going to get abs. you don't really need to work out. No. Maybe if somebody ate right and melted some fat off their stomach and they had been doing some of those superficial abdominal exercises, all of a sudden the six pack appears. And obviously, I am the biggest proponent of eating properly. I am just saying that eating healthy will not tone your abs. So all of your muscle, like all of your muscles, abdominals need, if you want to have a six pack, you're going to have to do the crunches. It won't be tomatoes or salad that does that. So there's a bunch also of other fitness myths related to diet. And some of these we've already talked about. So fat doesn't necessarily make you fat. Now, granted, too much fat puts more fat in storage. I'm not saying it's not, but it isn't just, that all fats can't be judged equally. We need fats for existence. We need them to make hormones. We need them to make your cell membranes properly. This is the reason why if people go on the drugs that take away all the cholesterol, sometimes if they actually are already not high enough cholesterol to make a difference, then you can actually damage muscle cells by pulling the cholesterol out of them. It actually creates a breakdown of the muscle tissue. And this is a known side effect of the cholesterol medications used inappropriately or used too long. And we underestimate because you can actually create some interesting problems with that. So obviously, eating and drinking more calories than you need from any source is going to lead to weight gain. Any source. It doesn't matter if it's fat or carb or protein. They all end up in the same place in the metabolism eventually. Now, there's arguments, of course, for eating properly, matching yourself, not making it so that you're a super carb bloater all of the time. I mean, these are just things that all of us have to learn over time of how to create a better diet. And certainly that's going to play a role, but it isn't just about fat. Now, this is another myth. The idea that eating before a workout is going to give you more energy to work harder. It actually does provide energy for your muscles to eat, but if you don't eat, your body will still have enough fuel. In fact, if your goal is to burn off stored fat, you are actually better off working out on an empty stomach. And this actually is starting to be shown in studies. So there are some small studies that show that working on an empty stomach, kind of like in the style of intermittent fasting, where people skip breakfast if you're doing a breakfast workout, use almost 20% more fat stores than eating before a workout. Although the energy is not as high after that workout. So people who ate breakfast before working out actually had better energy, but they did not lose as much body fat. So it's an interesting little thing. And these are just, again, little pieces of actual data showing what actually happens when we do certain sequences. And, this is another myth, as long as you exercise, you're going to lose weight no matter what you eat. No, I would say no. Even the most zealous workouts, if you have really bad food habits, that ain't going really anywhere. I mean, you might build some muscle, but you won't create the healthiest fitness. And it is true, again, we lose more weight when we burn a bunch of calories, and exercising helps burn calories faster. But even the most rigorous workouts only burn so many calories. So we do have to make sure that, we're not eating way more than what actually it's going to take to sustain us. And I think part of it is that we have to start to read labels, ask at the restaurant how many calories one of their dishes is. Some of the dishes you'd be absolutely gobsmacked how many calories are in it if you really add it up. And that's not just fast food, that's like normal restaurant food. You get plates of food with sauces and all sorts of stuff on it that you're not calculating into the figure, and you're intaking 3,000 calories when maybe as a woman you only need 2,200 calories in a day in one meal. So I think the average thought is that most people think it's about 30% exercise, 70% nutrition. So you know where I stand on nutrition. And there's other webinars if you've missed it. So top 15 myths that we just shared. No pain, no gain. That's a myth. You can't target fat burn. Cardio is only for people wanting to lose weight. I can turn my fat into muscles if I exercise enough with weights. The more that you sweat during exercise, the more fat you lose. If you're not sweating, you're not working hard enough. Stretching reduces injury. You should do cardio before strength training. Lifting weights makes you bulky. Cardio and calorie deficit is the only way to tone muscle and lose weight. Ab exercise is the only way to a strong core. Abs are made in the kitchen. Fat makes you fat. I shouldn't work out on an empty stomach. And if you exercise, you lose weight no matter what you eat. These are all fitness myths. And I'm hoping that I presented a little bit of some of the facts that'll be a little bit more helpful to you. So, Alleviate webinar series. I've pretty much managed to get this organized. It's undergone a little bit of revision because I was hoping to have a live event again in July. It turns out our venue for the live event has to undergo construction this summer. So we're probably going to be putting that a little bit later, but these are the 4 planned webinar series. So I'm just changing it up a little bit because it's really hard for me to do one webinar and the live event every month, like for several months in a row. It takes a lot of effort to put these things together. So these are the 4 Alleviate webinar series that we're going to do for August, November, February, and May. Hopefully you'll find something in there that's going to be kind of fun. So how to fast safely. Somebody asked me about that and I said, sure, I'll do one about fasting. We're going to look again at rebuilding the brain and things that you can do for cognitive health. Morning routines. So how you can work morning routines into your health regimen, and avoiding EMFs. So lots of people have asked questions about EMFs, and it's been a long time since I did the home safety course about EMFs and other things that you can find in homes. So we might do the Healthy Homes course after that introduction. So I'm hoping to have the Listening to the Body Intelligent Somatics live workshop in probably September. I'm aiming for September. And I hope, I don't know how many people on this call were actually at Listening to the Heart, but I had such beautiful feedback from it. And thank you if you were part of that and gave me some of that feedback. We had a great time. There's about 30 people there. We all learned how to do amazing heart math and I think we just all had a really great time together. And so we're going to do something similar for listening to the body. So basically what I'm attempting to teach is to help you be connected better to your body. So we started with the heart, we're going to move to the body. The last one's going to be the mind. And how do we actually gain some skill sets about connecting to these parts of ourselves and use them for our health and mental and physical. So I hope you'll be able to join for that. I will send out a notice about that hopefully shortly. And then I've decided to put a few more Helping Dr. Moms. Now it's been a while since I've done some Helping Dr. Mom webinars. And again, I'm super busy. So, and these might not apply to you, but if you know somebody who's going to be a mom or wants to be a mom, then these ones are for you. And of course, we're also going to do Raising Healthy Kids in a Toxic World this year in March. So thank you so much. You guys are always the best and you turn up even if I give you a Zoom link at the very end of it. I really apologize about that. I wasn't anticipate that the whole webinar platform would be, their server is down right now, so they couldn't whip out anything. So thank you so much for showing up. And of course, I'm very happy to answer questions if anybody has questions. I'm happy to answer them now. It's everybody just like, oh my God, I'm going to go and exercise right away. But first, I'm not going to eat. I'll do it tomorrow morning. I'm not going to eat and I'll burn some fat and I'll figure out what my maximum weight is that I can pick up. Somebody did ask me about the other day about machines versus free weights. If you're an inexperienced weight user, machines are more stable for you to learn how to do the motion properly. Also, of course, you can always hire a personal trainer to help you with the motion so that you have a sense of what it's supposed to feel like to do the motion of a certain weight exercise. But if you're a complete newbie, using machines can be really helpful because they're actually designed to keep you in the right space. Okay, my beautifuls, I will see you hopefully in the next couple of months on a webinar. All right, take care of yourselves. It's always good to see you. Thanks for watching. I love to connect to my patient community to inform and inspire, and I hope you'll join us again in the near future. Don't forget to check out whole-life-medicine.com for more webinars and events.